Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well today. It has been so long since I sat down to make a weird and wonderful plants video, and I am so ridiculously excited about it. Genuinely, these are probably my favourite kind of videos to make because in doing so I discover so many plants that I would never have known about otherwise. There's so many incredible plants out there and it's just fun to geek out and chat about them and show you them and talk about them and maybe build upon our wish lists a little bit, because I would say this series is 100% responsible for quite a few weird and wonderful plants I've got in my own collection. But yeah, today I have gone through all of your suggestions and I've come up with 10 more that I am very excited to take you through. But first, if you're new here, hi, my name's Claire and this is Yoli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learnt over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And yeah, this is part 5 in the series now, so if you enjoyed this episode and you fancy going and checking out the others, I will link them down below. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. So before we get into the plants that I want to take you through today, I just want to give an honourable mention to the plants that I have talked about in this series already. And one of you very, very kindly sent this plant to me literally a couple of days ago, and it's just absolutely amazing. I've never seen one in the flesh before. It's very new to me and I'm still very much figuring things out. But it is commonly known as the Rose of Jericho or the Resurrection plant. I'll have to put its Latin name on the screen because I actually can't remember it off the top of my head. But when I first got this one, I actually took some clips of it. So again, I'll put them on the screen. But it just kind of looks like a bundle of dead twigs. There's like, you'd never look at it and think, oh, that's a nice plant. And you put it into water and it magically just unfurls and comes back to life. And now it's starting to become really quite green and lovely. And I have actually got 2 in here. In fact, I think I was actually trying to work out if maybe I had 3 because there's several points where I feel like there could be more plant as it unfurls, if that makes sense. But yeah, it is just such an incredible one and I'm so excited to see what it does. I really don't know much about it at this point, bar what I have mentioned in this series already. So yeah, I will keep you updated with it. And with all of the other plants, I will move over so I can put pictures on the screen of them here and we can look at them together. But as always as well, these are in no particular order. But the first one I've got on this list is the Corybas himalaicus. And I have had types of Corybas within the genus on these lists before because there are some amazing ones. They're commonly known as miniature helmet orchids, and you can totally see why, because they definitely don't, for me anyway, look like what you would think of when you hear the word orchid. But if you look at the leaf and then the beautiful bloom that you see on top, it is like a little helmet on that leaf. And there's about 120 species of plants in the Corybas family. And there are a lot of species of Corybas that are still being discovered. There's many that have only been discovered in the last few years. But just looking at this one, like, I don't know what it reminds me of, but that bloom kind of reminds me of something from my childhood. Like, it's very cartoony. It's almost like a weird cartoon lollipop of some sort. It's just absolutely amazing. Or you know what it reminds me of? And this has nothing to do with my childhood, but almost like the plume of an amazing exotic bird or something. You know, it's the kind of thing that on David Attenborough you'd imagine just kind of popping up to attract a mate or something. It's absolutely insane. But what I also love about Corybas as a genus is if you look at the leaves of the plant, they're almost like miniature velvet leaf anthuriums. Like, looking at that little leaf there's something almost a little bit clarinervium-y about it. So I know this is not one that you can typically get hold of or grow in a home environment, nor should you, because I do believe it is an endangered species. But I feel like if I was to grow this plant, whether or not it was in bloom, it's one that I would just absolutely adore because it is just amazing. And it's kind of hard to get a sense of the scale of this plant just looking at it in pictures, but apparently this one is only about 4 to 5 centimetres big, which I believe is like that. So it's absolutely teeny tiny. And as you can probably see, it's growing kind of attached to other plants. And this is an epiphytic plant, which means that it doesn't usually grow straight from the ground. It will grow on, as I say, moss, rocks, other plants, and get its nutrients from that. And yeah, I have made a note here as well saying that it is a protected species. So unfortunately, it is not one that you would be able to easily source as a houseplant. And if you could see it available online, I would personally be very, very wary because I would suspect it was probably illegally poached. So this is not a plant that I'm going to be adding to my collection anytime soon, but it's one that I am greatly admiring from afar. I just think it's gorgeous. And I'm not typically an orchid person. I know I've said it before, I can kind of appreciate them in other people's collections, but for some reason they just haven't grabbed me yet. Maybe at some point they will, I don't know, but I look at ones like this and I'm just like, oh yeah, I could totally get on board with this. Because yeah, it's just a really amazing one. And then this next one is also very cool, very weird, and I'm going to attempt to pronounce its name correctly, but I may not get it right. It is a Pterisanthes SP Borneo Batman. And just looking at it, like just looking at the foliage, there's something, like when I first saw this plant, I was like, there's something almost alocasia-y about that leaf. I don't know quite what it is because I know the structure of the plant is very not alocasia. Like it's almost, in fact, it's commonly known as the bat piper. And I did wonder if that was because piper as a genus typically grows in a much more similar way to this. I suspect that is probably the case. But yeah, it just kind of looks like a very thin vining alocasia to me for some reason. But obviously the common name Batman, it's got these insanely weird leaf shapes that are so dark and dramatic, but they've also got those beautiful kind of silvery margins on the leaf, which I just think is so, so, so gorgeous. And this one's native to the tropical rainforests of Borneo, and apparently it is such a humidity-loving plant. Like, this is actually one that you can grow as a houseplant, and it doesn't seem that difficult to get a hold of, actually, but they do very much suggest growing this one in very high levels of humidity or in terrarium environments. And actually looking at this one, I feel like I might have seen it. I've never grown it myself personally, but I feel like I might have seen it in terrarium setups over the years, like online and stuff. It's got kind of a weird familiarity to it. I don't know, I feel like I've seen this plant before. But several articles that I read about it online as well describe it as an easy care plant. And I don't know why, just looking at this plant, it's not one that I would look at and think easy care. So my guess is that if you are able to provide like really great humidity and really stable conditions, then maybe it's one that you don't need to do that much to, but I can imagine it being quite fussy if you don't get it just right. Again, that's very similar to Piper as a genus. It can be super easy if you've got the right conditions, and if you don't, then it's going to kick up a stink very quickly and can go downhill so, so, so fast. The weird thing about this one is if you look at the leaves kind of up close, they're really, really furry, and I don't know why, just the thinness of the leaf, it kind of feels quite surprising that they're so hairy. But there's a picture that I'm looking at here, and on the back of the leaf, looking at the hair, it kind of looks like spider mite damage to me. So I feel like this would be a little bit of a nightmare plant because I'd constantly be like, oh my God, is that spider mites? Although I guess if you're growing it in a high humidity terrarium environment, that would help to kind of protect the plant a little bit. The other thing I was going to say is with all of these plants as well, I have to use pictures from Instagram when I make this series just because some of these images are copyrighted. But if you want to see more of these plants, Google them, because there are some amazing pictures on Google that sadly I can't include in my video just in case I get a flag for copyright. And yes, sometimes there aren't as much selection of images on Instagram if they are like deemed very rare. Yeah, but this one is just absolutely insane. And actually having a look online, it is available. I could mainly see prices in dollars, but I could see in a few Indonesian plant shops, it was going for around about $30 for a small plant, which I don't really know if that's good or bad, to be honest, but that feels like a fairly solid price for something you don't see every day, in my opinion. But yeah, it's one I would definitely be intrigued to grow. I think I would probably be a little bit nervous of growing it in a standard room environment. As I say, I do have pretty good humidity in this space, but even so, I think if I was going to get a plant like this, I would want to give it a big terrarium space, or a cabinet space at least, you know? But yeah, it's really cool. And then this one is a genus of plant that I've never even heard of before, and the genus is Telosma, and the name of the plant is Telosma minor variegata. And I discovered loads of really cool types of Telosma as I was doing research for this video, but the variegated minor is just amazing. It's got the most incredible variegation, and it's the variegation that I really love because it's not so dappled, it's more kind of defined, and I always say intentional. Like sometimes you can look at variegated plants, like for example certain types of variegated alocasia, definitely types of variegated anthurium and stuff like that, and I would just look at them and I'll be like, you look a bit unwell, like that variegation really isn't doing anything for me. Whereas block variegation like this that feels very defined and very kind of meant to be there, I don't know, it just really gets me. And this one has got the most beautiful shades of green within its variegation. It's just a very visually pleasing plant to look at, I think, and something that I haven't seen before. But it's native to southern China, and it's a twining climbing plant. So looking at it, I think it would probably benefit from a trellis. Again, there's not a huge amount of information about this plant online, but I do believe it would probably grow quite similar to something like a Dioscorea or a sweet potato vine or something like that. And I don't know if it would be easy to grow, but again, I did see things saying that it was ideal for beginners, and I don't know, like maybe it is, maybe it's a really easy plant, but knowing what I know about plants over the years and having experienced lots of different types of plants, it kind of looks like one that I would look at and go, oh God, I feel like that's going to be really tricky. Like I say, I could be totally wrong about this, and I probably am, but it's one that would freak me out a little bit. Maybe it's just because it's a really unfamiliar genus, I don't know. But this one is also capable of producing really beautiful flowers. There weren't that many flowers that I could see pictured of the variegated variety. I'm going to assume they're fairly similar to the non-variegated variety. And the flowers, if I can find some pictures, I'll put them on the screen, but they kind of looked like buttercups crossed with violets. They're really pretty. And the person who commented about this plant on my last video actually said that this one that doesn't do well in high levels of humidity, they were like, it won't do well in a cabinet, like you want to grow it at normal room humidity. And again, that is something that really surprised me, because looking at it, I was like, that it feels like a plant that would want quite a lot of humidity. So it's one that I feel like is quite unexpected perhaps in its growth structure and what it likes and what it doesn't like. And again, this is one that is actually quite readily available to buy. Not so much in the UK, but I could see lots of prices in euros. So it seems to be retailing for a small plant around about 60 euros to buy. Again, I don't really have a sense of whether or not that's a good price because I'm not that familiar with the genus. It's something that I wouldn't say it's gone like to the top of my wish list or anything, but I am kind of intrigued by this plant. It's one that I saw and I was like, ooh, I was like, that just looks like something very different to anything I've got, but it kind of combines lots of the elements of plants that I really love. So yeah, I would say at some point I would be interested to grow it, but it's not one that I'm going to be rushing to find. Oh, and this is a really fun one, and it's a type of Conophytum, and I have had other Conophytums on these lists before because there are so many weird and wonderful ones within this genus. But this one is a Conophytum burgeri, and it's native to the Northern Cape province of South Africa, and it is also endangered. So I believe that a lot of this plant is actually cultivated in a home environment. And looking at the pictures that I've seen of it, it literally just looks like jelly sweets. Like, I don't know if you remember those like little strawberry jelly sweets you could get. I don't think they were Haribos, but they were something like that. But also it kind of looks like you could just pop it. It looks like a very satisfying plant to grow. And it is also one that can flower. There were some beautiful pictures I saw of it flowering. It can produce these beautiful purple flowers. I believe in autumn it typically flowers. And when I was looking at pictures of it, you can see some pictures that are really kind of like dark red and others that are kind of pale green. And all of them are very kind of jelly-like and transparent, but apparently the colour of the plant very much depends on how much light it's getting. So my guess, like knowing what I know about other types of plant that sun stress, is that the darker red ones are ones that have received more sun and the greener ones are ones that haven't received quite so much. But the other thing that I found really, really interesting is that this type of plant actually can develop quite a thick skin, and it's actually not particularly attractive to look at. And if I can find some pictures, I'll put it on the screen. But a lot of people actually choose to peel them in order to make them appear nicer. And I don't think there's any harm in doing that. However, the reason that this skin forms is to kind of like form a protective layer against the elements such as like very intense direct sun. So if you are going to peel your Conophytum, I would probably, again, I have not grown this plant, but instinct would say perhaps move it a little bit back from the spot you've got it in so it isn't getting as much light, so it doesn't kind of burn or anything like that. But yeah, if you are growing this plant purely for its flowers, for example, then I probably wouldn't bother peeling it because, as I say, it is kind of natural inbuilt sun protection that the plant is giving itself. So typically I don't tend to interfere with those things, but it does look amazing when you do peel it. It looks very fresh and, as I say, like little jelly sweets. But yeah, like I say, it is one that is considered endangered in its natural habitat. It is very much cultivated in a home environment, and it is quite easily accessible as well. I did a quick Google and loads of places were popping up. You seem to be able to buy one for about £10 here in the UK. I'm also not massively into cacti and succulents. Like I would say cacti and succulents probably make up about 5% of my collection. I'm typically more aroids and tropical plants. So again, I don't have much of a sense of whether or not that's a good price, and I'm not being particularly useful here in regards to the pricing of these plants. But most of the ones on the list today are ones that I am totally unfamiliar with. So yeah, it's one that I would be quite intrigued to grow, I think. I would say that it's one that I will probably put on my wish list. Again, it's not one that's going to be kind of wiping the wish list and going straight to the top, but it's one that I would definitely be intrigued to grow at some point because I have nothing like it and I've never grown anything like it. So yeah. And then the next one is another one in the orchid family. This is a Bulbophyllum polliculosum. But yeah, it's a flowering plant in the orchid family, native to Thailand and Vietnam. And when I first saw this plant, when I first Googled it and I saw pictures of its flowers, which are incredibly bulbous and very, very weird, I don't know why, I felt like it was quite a big plant. Like it felt like the flowers were quite grand. And then I scrolled down a little bit and I saw a picture of it mounted on a piece of wood. And this plant is teeny tiny. And I don't know why, it kind of made me like it even more. I was like, it's very small, it's very dainty, it's very cute. It likes to grow in semi-shaded conditions. Apparently it's a very thirsty plant. As you can probably tell by the way it's being grown as well, it is another epiphyte. Typically plants in the orchid family are epiphytes, meaning that again, they're not terrestrial, they don't grow from the ground. So yeah, growing this plant on a piece of cork bark or something like that would probably, I would have thought, be a very good way to grow it. And it is one that does seem to be very much grown for its blooms, as I know a lot of plants in the orchid family are. I actually don't really have a sense of what its foliage looks like because, as I say, it's very, very small and I can't really see many pictures of that. So I would assume if you're willing to kind of put in the groundwork and accept the fact that there's going to be periods where it's not flowering, then maybe it's the plant for you. But yeah, like, as I say, I'm not massive on orchids, and although I do think it's very cool, it's not one that I'm going to personally be rushing out to buy anytime soon. The other thing, though, I do quite like about it is it almost feels like it's a plant in black and white. Like, all of the pictures I've seen of it, it feels very kind of grayscale, and there's something kind of weird and gothic and, I don't know, kind of creepy about that I quite like. But yeah, it's not one that I have any desire personally to grow. However, you can get hold of this plant quite easily. I saw it on eBay and Etsy. There were quite a few listings for this plant as well, typically ranging between about 40 and 60 pounds, which for a little thing is quite expensive. But if it's a plant that you really want, then, as I always say, invest in your happiness. But yeah, not one for me, I don't think. But then this one is really, really, really weird. This one is the Sinocrassula yunnanensis, commonly known as the hedgehog succulent, which you will be able to see why. It does look like a little hedgehog just curled up in a ball. And this one's native to China. And again, the person that let me know about this plant said that apparently it starts its life as a little kind of hedgehoggy thing, and then it grows upwards. And when I first read this comment, I was like, I don't understand how that's possible. But actually looking through pictures of this plant, it takes the most weird, like the weirdest form as it grows up and matures that you wouldn't expect if you were to just see it as a little plant. I think as well, like looking at something like that, I kind of immediately my brain went to comparing it to something like the burrow's tail, and I was like, oh, maybe it will trail, or maybe it'll just kind of like grow upwards, kind of like the Crassula manieriana or something like that. But it gets weirder as it gets older, and apparently it can like grow up walls and stuff and kind of form these big kind of sheets of plants, which is very bizarre, but it's got such a cool kind of spiky texture to it. It almost looks quite prehistoric, and I do quite like plants like that. Apparently as well, it is one that doesn't have to be ridiculously mature in order to flower. It can flower from quite an early age. And in fact, again, when I Googled it, I saw some pictures of quite young plants producing the most gorgeous blooms. They're very kind of like bushy and clustered, and almost there's something a bit Hoya bloomish about them, which I really quite like. But it probably won't surprise you to find out as well that this one thrives in high light. It is extremely drought tolerant and very low maintenance. And again, this is one that is actually quite cheap to buy. You can get this plant for about £6 in the UK, which I think is a very good price. I don't think I've ever seen it about. I don't know, maybe the demand for this plant just isn't that high, or maybe people just don't know about it. But yeah, I would consider getting this plant if I saw it, just because I'm intrigued. And yeah, I've never grown anything quite like it. So yes, I'm not ruling that one out. Oh, and this one is very cool. This is the Trevesia palmata. And again, Trevesia is a genus of plant that I previously have not been familiar with, but I did, whilst doing my research for this, come across many different types of Trevesia that I was just like, that's so cool. That's so awesome. I would have that in a heartbeat. But this one is commonly known as the snowflake tree or ghost's foot. And you can probably tell why it's commonly known as the snowflake tree, because it's got the most incredible leaves that really do look like snowflakes. And it's native to Southeast Asia, where it can grow up to 20 feet in height, which absolutely blew my mind. Like, that is the most insanely tall tree. Obviously, if you were going to be growing this one as a houseplant, it's unlikely it would ever reach that point, but over time, you never know if you had good light. Because yeah, it is one that really does like quite high levels of light and very warm, humid conditions. So probably one that you would need to introduce a few measures in order to keep happy if you were going to grow it in like a UK home environment or something like that. But I don't know, like there's just something really, it's almost like a hybrid plant of an anthurium and an umbrella tree. There's something about it that feels like, I don't know, a cross that shouldn't have happened. And the other reason that I say anthurium is apparently, like in a very similar way to anthuriums, its new leaves will come in very, very small and almost kind of brown, and then they will get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. That is one thing that I absolutely love about anthuriums. It's one of my, like, it makes me so excited growing them. I love when I see like the little start of a leaf and I'm like, oh, how big is it gonna get? And yeah, this is a plant that I would love to grow. I'd absolutely love to grow it. It's very, very different to anything I've got. It's a plant that, like, with every new leaf, it kind of feels like you'd be getting like 10 in one, because it's got that weird kind of middle section that almost looks like webbing in between like a weird comparison to make perhaps, but like an aquatic animal's toes, you know, the sort of thing that helps them to swim. And then it's got these weird kind of stem-like sections that then go into more leafy bits. It's just so bizarre. And yeah, it probably won't surprise you to know that this is not an easy plant to come by from what I can see. There are other types of Trevesia that I have seen online. In fact, Grow Tropicals had, I can't remember what type of Trevesia it was, but a Trevesia something else on their website a little while ago for I think about £120. This one I have seen retailing for about £30 as a very small plant here in the UK, which personally I actually think is really quite good. But the website I looked on was completely sold out at the time. So it's one that I will be keeping an eye out for because I think it would be a really fun one to grow. But yeah, it was one that I was not familiar with. In fact, most of these I had never seen before. And that, as I say, is my favourite thing about making these kind of videos. Like, I love being able to share the weird and wonderful plants with you guys and just kind of talk about them and the potential for growing them and what they might do, and then hear about some of you guys that do grow them as well, because yeah, some of these I've just never had access to and may never have access to. So again, as always, please do comment any future suggestions for videos down below. Like if you've got a weird and wonderful plant in your head, or if you come across one, do send them my way. Drop me a message on Instagram or something, because yeah, I love getting ideas from you guys and finding out about more amazing plants. But then the next one, this one is a Gethyllis verticillata. Again, I don't know if that's completely pronounced right, but it's commonly known as the cuckoo-macranca. Yeah, cuckoo-macranca. Which is native to southern Namibia. And I thought this was quite interesting. Apparently the K letters represent the clicks in the seemingly extinct southern African language of the Koinia people. And I had a friend that was South African when I was younger, and she was able to do these incredible clicks in certain words, and I believe her grandma's name had them in. I'm not gonna try and do that, but that I just thought that was so cool, the cuckoo-macranca, like thinking about how that might sound. Yeah, it's also just such a beautiful plant to look at. It's very Avatar, this one. Like the thing that amazed me when I first watched Avatar was all of the beautiful mystical plants in this kind of forest of, I don't know, just all things magical, and I feel like something like this would fit right in. It's got very hairy leaves as well, and they kind of look like they're blowing in the wind. Like it feels like a plant that has got a lot of movement in it. Oh, also my camera battery is just about to die, so bear with me. There we go. Sorry if that was a little abrupt. Basically, I found out recently that if I don't stop the recording of my camera and then the battery dies, sometimes I can lose everything I've recorded. I have lost a couple of videos recently and it's been very frustrating. But going back to the Gethyllis verticillata, yes, hairy leaves, that's where we got to. But the most amazing thing as well about this plant is that actually the kind of like the bulbous mound, not the root system of the plant, but almost like the tuber, it's actually a fruit, and that, as I say, develops below the ground. It's known as the berry of the plant, and I found that quite interesting because typically, like you hear berry and you think of something that grows on trees, you never think of something that grows beneath the surface of the ground. But it is edible and is often described as having a finger-length or sausage-shaped appearance. And something that I also found very interesting is that the berries of this plant are also used to infuse both spirit and perfume due to their fragrance. So I couldn't find out exactly like if there was a comparison to what they smelt like, but I don't know. I would be intrigued to smell this plant. Yeah, it's one as well that I would be incredibly keen to grow. I think it looks so beautiful. It's got those gorgeous little kind of like almost pinky red hairs at the top of the plant. It also is capable of flowering, and the flowers are so beautiful. There's something about them that's almost quite lotus-like. They're kind of like thin petaled lotus flowers in my mind. I just think it's lovely. And yeah, as I say, just very enchanted, very whimsical. So yeah, I would say that is another one that's going on my wish list. Oh no. But then this one that I came across recently, This was actually one that I believe someone might have commented on one of my videos about, but also I saw this in a wedding magazine. One of my friends has got married recently, and I was at her house and she had a wedding magazine, and there was this incredible wedding where all of the flowers were black. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I was like, is that actually, like, is that a thing? Like, I've seen very dark coloured tulips before. And that is when I came across the Zantedeschia cantor, which is commonly known as the black calla lily. And firstly, I think the foliage of this plant is really gorgeous. I know it might not be for everyone. It's quite simple, but it's quite speckled, and I really love that. But the foliage is the flower is absolutely extraordinary. It is almost jet black. And it's a cultivar of Zantedeschia aethiopicta, which is native to South Africa. However, you can actually grow this one over here in the UK. Commonly people use it in like baskets and borders and stuff like that. And obviously, considering the fact that me and Ross are getting into outdoor gardening at the moment, we're starting to dabble a little bit. It is one that I would be quite interested to add to the garden. You can, I believe, grow this as an indoor plant as well if you're able to provide good light. But I think it'd be quite cool to try growing this plant outside. So yeah, I might have a little hunt about and see what I can find. But the flowers of this plant typically appear in summer, and they can apparently bloom for several months at a time. So like with some flowers, like we've got a couple of flowering things in the garden at the moment, they're beautiful for like a week and then they are done. So the fact that this has flowers for several months is like, it makes me want to grow the plant more. I don't then know if the foliage would also die back for the rest of the year and then the plant will come back. I have no idea. But if the foliage was to stay, I would absolutely grow this plant year round. I think it's so lovely. And having a quick look online as well, bulbs for this plant, for one plant, are around about £4, which feels a little bit expensive to me. But at the same time, it is something very unusual, and apparently it spreads quite quickly as well. So maybe you'd only need to get a few, and then in, I don't know, a year or two, you might have way more. But yeah, it's one, maybe it's the first plant on my garden wish list. Interesting. I don't think I have a garden wish list yet. And then the final one, this is one that I've had on the list for a while and I haven't included, but it is a type of Nepenthes, and it is the Nepenthes edwardsiana. And oh my God, it is just the weirdest thing. Like, Nepenthes produce these big pictures that are incredibly phallic and incredibly weird to look at. They can be very beautiful as well. And the thing I love about the edwardsiana is it's kind of like rimmed around the top. It's kind of got these weird 3D, I don't know how to describe it, so I'll put some pictures in. But it almost looks like it's been crafted out of clay or something. It's very alien and very bizarre. And the most insane thing that I found out about this plant is that the pictures can actually grow to be 50 centimetres in length, which is about that big. That is half a metre, which is just insane. And I have grown Nepenthes myself before. In fact, the Nepenthes that I had up until quite recently actually just didn't make it in the move. It's one of the plants that had been hanging on by a thread and I finally gave up with when I moved in here, because I was like, oh dear, at some point maybe I will try again. But I was having so many issues with it. Mainly, I think the main one came down to watering, because Nepenthes is a type of plant, as with many carnivorous plants, that enjoy water that hasn't got any kind of treatment chemicals or anything like that, meaning that a lot of the time you can't use tap water. You either need to use reverse osmosis water or rainwater or distilled water, which isn't always that readily available or easy to get hold of. And so there were times with my Nepenthes that I would just water it through normally with tap water. I did sometimes add in some Tap Safe, which is the stuff that you can get. You can get it specifically for plants, but it's way cheaper to just get the stuff that's made for goldfish. But yeah, it had lost all of its pictures and it just wasn't looking very happy. So I'd really like to try again, but I don't currently have a Nepenthes in my collection, which is sad. But yeah, the other thing about Nepenthes is typically you don't fertilise them because, as I say, it is a carnivorous plant. It will catch its own food in the big kind of pitchers. The pitchers will produce some fluid which just kind of sits at the bottom, and fruit flies, small insects, bugs, stuff like that will crawl in. They'll be, I believe, attracted to the fluid and then they will drown, they'll be broken down, and that will be the plant making the food for itself. And if you want to keep the plant producing pitchers, in fact, you definitely shouldn't fertilise it, because if you do give it additional nutrients, then it's going to be like, oh, well, I don't need to make my own food, and it will stop giving you them. So yeah, it's a fascinating genus of plant. It really is. And this one is just absolutely crazy looking. So it's definitely on the wish list, 100% on the wish list. But yeah, not just yet. Maybe once all of my plants have had, I don't know, a few more months of settling in and I've figured out watering and stuff like that. But yeah, this one also is not particularly cheap to buy. I saw seed pods going for about £40, and I think growing this one from seed would be very interesting actually. I've never grown a Nepenthes from seed, so it is something that I would be keen to do. But if you wanted to get it as an established plant, even just small plants from what I can see start at £150, which is so expensive. In my opinion, I know some people will happily just splash that money on a plant, but I think that's very expensive. And I don't think it's a price that I would be prepared to pay either. Definitely not at the moment. So yeah. But as I say, those are the 10 for today. And please do let me know if you come across any more weird and wonderful ones. I would always love to know your suggestions. Sometimes even if you're like, oh no, she'll have heard of that one, I won't have done. So yeah, do let me know, comment them down below. Let me know which weird and wonderful plants you've got in your collection as well, because I am slowly accumulating some very strange ones myself, and it's just really fun. It's really fun. I absolutely love it. But yes, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.
Stay sexy, plant lovers.